Hey, Dr. Jubb. Happy
Lukey.
face.
Hey mate,
Hey, mate.
how you doing?
All
Yeah,
right. Thank you so much for being there. You know, you really put a smile on my face whenever I get a text from you, and I'm really happy to be able to have you on my channel. And give you a platform to share.
it's amazing. Yeah, because I heard things from Cloud, that I never ever heard before. It caused most everything I knew just to fall away. Matter of fact, because um, it was like bricks that was put into a wall that didn't fit in any wall that had been built, basically. Yeah. Um, I really was thinking it's good for our listeners to know a bit about Life Hydrate. I was wondering if you could find an image of like black ice that's a cube that's put in a glass, and you're looking at an image of carbon and cold temperature carbon dioxide, you know, coming off it, and you're seeing it sort of spilling out over the glass. That's going to be a good image for us while we talk just a little, because you can see that the Earth is like that, and it's never not. You can see that only a certain amount of carbon or anything there can actually be really in the atmosphere. And when a certain level of that colloid is reached as to a sort of barometric pressure, yeah, you can see that all that it's able to do is to be able to hold on to what it can within the cup, and that you look and you see like a gas and a cloud spilling out over the cup, and that's what happens with carbon that's in excess. So it's not possible for the atmosphere within yourself to be able to have more or less as it's designed. But if you interfered with that design, then that's not going to be so good. But let's look at who's really, interfering with that design. Certainly, trees are part of it, aren't they? And trees are supposed to be, and black tarmac everywhere isn't, and those sorts of things. But ideas a little bit like, could it be that carbon, just the same as COVID, something else is going on, which is more to do with black swanning everybody? And shouldn't that be something as an idea that's looked into, that everybody could be open? Some people could feel that way, and others could look in to see what they could describe that more. But I was thinking about Life Hydrate because I saw that there was an enzyme in space, or a ratio, in fact, and then I looked on the Earth to see that I could find anything that was close to what that was, and I saw a slip, thick, and bulk constant in astronomy, and that made me think about the gravitational weight of everything and the relation of something to something else in a colloid. And I saw that there was a sap and various things in trees that would combine with other things, and become secondary element. I mean, then that would be, that comes to be like a seed crystal in water, and that causes the molecules of the water to be in a proper structure and shape. And inside ourselves, we have this surfactant. And just like carbon dioxide, which can never ever reach more or less per se, and some fluctuations can be existed, but it's always equalizing itself, which we could talk a bit about. Who's speaking about carbon? They must know about transmutation. Good,
Oh, yeah.
because now they know that something isn't fixed per se, but also too that when you're looking at how much carbon could be in our atmosphere. You can see in the cup as things are just filled up there and it's spilling over. It can't be more in that spot. And that's like the Earth, basically, with carbon. That if it's produced more or less, it's spilled over if it's produced less. But at the moment, we've got really low levels of carbon, actually. And that the idea that carbon insulates, which it does, and it neutralizes temperature somewhat, but only could be in the atmosphere at a certain percentage as a colloid relative, and always has. And when you look at C14 carbon, which deteriorates over time, it deteriorates at a set rate. And when you look at all things to see how much carbon was in something over time, you're looking to see that that's something that's been always very stable and never not. And so it doesn't mean that extra heat could be because radiation is put by weapons and things and stuff. But if you look at life hydrate and acetyl neurominic acid, that's the surfactant that you and I, we're supposed to have in our body. Nice. And if you could imagine just for a moment, like you've got these tiny, very small molecules which they act as surfactant, meaning they activate a membrane. And it's only a certain size, like 9 carbon atoms, and that 9 carbon atom is got a valence of magnicity in its static field, magnicity, and it's enough to cause a north negative more presence and south positive to come to more, be neutralizing that in a spot in a moment, and it opens the membrane up to be able to receive a nutrient. And the same with the membrane as it comes into the nucleus. And so N-acetyl neurominic acid is the surfactant that we have in our species, and in our gene we don't have any genetic to be able to break down any other surfactant that comes from an animal, for instance, much at all. There's nothing in our gene that allows us to break down N-glyconeurominic acid, which is the surfactant that's in an animal. And so, in our work, that's called the molecule of death, because it sort of can't be broken down. And under the microscope, it was for me to see a long time ago that most all these cells were full of a condition which was an inflammation of silica. And when I looked in there, I could see N-glyconeurominic acid was full in there. And of course, that can't be broken down. And I could see how that as a surfactant, having gone in instead of what's proper, can have really cause, a whole chain of things, which is really the condition behind a lot of symptoms. And so we're just looking at something which is not ecological simple, because other molecules can be as well. But life hydrate really is the surfactant that I produced, and it's N-acetyl neurominic acid is really a sialic acid or a silica base sort of. Yes, okay. You can hear that sialysis. Sialysis is an inflammation of silica of the cell, and N-acetyl neurominic acid is a form of silica, and the blood it's a bloodborne inhibitor. And as you've got plenty in your blood, your red blood corpuscles are really nice and unstuck and flowing. Mm-hmm. And it would be just for me to give someone, put a little bit in water, and suddenly they feel that water, and it's come to be oil. I can't understand that. That's unbelievable, I think. How could water suddenly become oil? And one drop could just cover your whole arm. It's just shocking all of a sudden, you see. So, and when somebody just has a little bit of this, all of a sudden, right there, you could take some blood before and blood afterward. You'll see how in just a short moment, blood becomes unstuck. and things are flowing. And this really very small amount of milligram is extremely powerful, because down there you've got such a surface area, matter of fact, and substance like rhodium, osmium, or ruthenium, which is these noble elements, is really what causes all your cells to have a proper corona itself and protects the cell against toxicity. And so for me, back in 1978, I was really interested in membrane permeability, surfactant enhancement. I saw what the body had that caused you to have youth, and these tiny little platforms, sphingosine and ceramide, were very important. And that if you made products small enough and elements small enough, and you combined it with sphingosine and ceramide, which that's what I've done, you could cross through the membrane of the mouth and come into the blood. So I really saw that how important it was that any condition that anybody had would have to have improved the body's surfactant, which your own body's surfactant. And your own body's surfactant is produced when you've got proper Brunner gland activity, and that's the largest organ more or less down there in the intestine, huge, travels right through the small intestine and some of the proximal portion of the ileum, the jejunum, and the so the blood has these three blood-borne inhibitors that really block the expression of neoplastic condition, which neoplastic condition is really the inclusion of life colloid, which shouldn't be in the cell, or not just in the cell, but typically also all right in the glycopacking that's around the cell. And that only has come about from the material itself being not in a proper north negative environment enough to be able to be depolarized. And so very small amount of this in water, that like life hydrate, like a third of a teaspoon, is put into like a litre of water, and that's unbelievable. You put that in the fridge and it's chilled, you have just like 4 or 5 ounces before bed, cold. You'd be shocked how that improves your eyesight over time of itself. It's like a hack to improve your eyesight. But sialic acid really is responsible when it's caused to have come in from animals to be a condition like what we've just talked about, called sialysis. And that's the most commonly observed sort of condition of neoplasm, or some people can call that cancer, but actual diabetes and all kinds of conditions really is a neoplasm. So it's typical that the nuclei, you can see that under the microscope, very amazing. I had opportunity to be able to see things which most people could have never ever seen, and the resolution of things back when I saw all this and ongoing to this day, you can see how the nuclei really can get cleared up, but you can give it a chance. You've got tiny little channels which connect the nucleus with the outside of the membrane of the cell, called figura, and they're very, very small, but we've got substances like nitrous oxide, which N-acetylalumitic acid can be broken down and to produce nitrous oxide, which assists to cause the dilation of these lymph channels inside your brain and inside your eyes and things. Okay, so let's see. When you improve microcirculation anywhere, you're going to help build back substance. That's part of the reason why somebody might use black gold, because they can excoriate the tissue just a little bit, the skin, and then they can put a gauze saturated with black gold on that for a little bit of a moment of time that it absorbs, goes into the skin, goes into the body, goes very deep, and then you can scrape that with a wooden spoon and some castor oil, and that can cause someone to improve muscle and get back circulation. Like, let's say somebody's really big up top, but their legs are really small. They haven't been able to build their legs. So you can scrape the waist and the legs, and you can then get back circulation to the legs. So and microcirculation. But just to give you some ideas, the nuclei really typically would have suffered because somebody was doing the wrong thing. So someone should stop that. That's causing inflammation of silica when you've brought in glyconeurominic acid from any other source, like a flesh food, which you and I, we don't have any DNA for us to be able to have broken any of that down. And where that's found wrongfully, of course, brought in as consumed, that flesh food from animals, birds, fish, and the flesh consumption itself, that molecule of death really can't be broken down like we'll be talking about. And it mimics life hydrate, it mimics your own and acetyl-uramic acid, which is our body surfactant. And this is the primary ingredient in our species breast milk.
Oh, wow.
Is a primary ingredient in colostrum.
Oh, okay.
Yep, in our species. So when you look at food from our mother, you can see that a large percentage of it is hydrogen, basically, or sweet, and then 10% of it, or 5% of it is protein, very small, and maybe 8 or 9% of it is fats. Okay. The rest of it is carbohydrate relative. So, where something was beyond that, you've got an accumulation going on where anything is, and certainly it is where we've brought in things which don't have any gene to break down. It causes the nuclei, which it really is where DNA, meaning that you've got a mechanism to be able to faithfully produce protein, which that protein synthesis really is vital for proper cellular function. And the glycopacking around cells can, other than have been kept with a vacuum relative, that it drew things out of the cell, which it's meant to, and that space can have been no longer actually giving the body a proper capacity to be able to depolarize itself. And when you've filled in the nucleus with toxin and you don't clear that away, which you can, because ubiquitin molecules that we specialize in all of our products and things, it's got DNA that is connected to silica, which it causes a template of that substance then to be able to be produced in the body. So it's sort of something which causes the body to have a memory of how to produce something. So it's not like something that has to be taken all the time. Now, I was thinking, just to slow down where we are with each other a bit, and just for our listeners to be able to get a picture a little bit more. We've been, if you could see it, looking at a glass where you've got black ice, or you've got ice, carbon dioxide that's really frozen, and it's a block of that or something small, and it sort of really is pouring out over itself like a cloud of carbon dioxide and gas. I mean, you could see that only a certain amount could be there in the container, and everything else is sort of spilled out. And so that's like your cell, matter of fact. And that what would it be if suddenly something changed about that? So it wasn't open per se, but it still would want to release itself, wouldn't it? But if it were insulated more, would it stay longer? There's all sorts of things. And what does our body? But if something is ecological, it's meant to be there. And when it's not going to work. But the idea that carbon doesn't just breathe off the earth, which it does, when it's in excess, if it was, but what would be a reason why that's always to have ever been constant? Now, it doesn't mean that dirty fuel wasn't given to you or I when a car can run off water, right?
Oh,
and
yeah.
so you've got cars that run off water. You've got engines that even can run off water, and you've got clean energy. So, it's been wrong that where you didn't need cables, but you could have wireless, and yet, because of copper, you've only got a certain level of things which could be metered. And so, a lot of that stuff isn't right. But the taxing of people, which some 27 nations have sort of gone along with, and taxing people massively. And then has anybody thought, first, why is everybody being taxed for that? And then first it is like hardly any of these people could have any money for their own selves. And all of a sudden, like an individual's got to be coming up with $600 a year for what they did. And a family could have like $1,500 tax, that they have to pay. And to who does collect all of that, and what are they doing with it? It's sort of an interesting thing, isn't it? But it's like the body can either just be left to function beautifully as it is, and science that you hear can cause you to, have an obedience to being really good with your body and doing what you can to have a good long life, of course, and things to assist to help others have a good long life. Amyloidosis, which is progressive, which is sort of really a tiring out of the brain relatively, because cells get broken down, and life hydrate is really what would protects everything and stops that progressive amyloidosis. And lots of studies show how important it is, of course, as the primary ingredient in milk or our colostrum of our species. It's a naturally occurring sugar molecule, which really is manufactured and assisted to be caused in your body in good health in your Brunner gland. And your Brunner gland is in the passes to the duodenum and the jejunum and the ileum, and the proximal portion of the ileum. So it's really, really huge organ, and it passes on north negative, which is very important, that north negative magneton charge. And red blood corpuscles only be able to be kept apart because you've got tiny, very small magneton there, which cause a colloid to be of a set tension. And so that's what a colloid is. So, but the primary substance in breast milk is this surfactant, and in the colostrum also of our species. And guess what? You honest to God, without it, your immune system to function isn't booted up. Yeah, it boots your immune system up, and to function properly, it improves and maintains just like incredible your vital cognitive processing. People who have good brain function right through their life, they have nice amounts of N-acetyluminic acid, plus they have good albumin levels, and meaning they've got good hygiene of the blood. So if it's very important, you could imagine that your body membrane has capacity for this surfactant enhancement. And the substance that we produce inside itself is N-acetyluminic acid, which is vitamin L or life hydrate. And so N-acetyluminic acid really is useful because, of course, like what we were just saying, is it has such greater capacity to neutralize oxidation and stop it. And so you see that where somebody has this, they really don't have allergy. And because it's enzymes that help break stuff down, plus it's enzymes that help protect the cell from any toxin. And it's causing cells to be able to be hydrated and remain hydrated. And so it keeps its parts of hydrogens. It's a cell membrane. So it's in a non-stick zone versus a sticky zone. So it sort of Teflons everything, which it should. So a diabetic, of course, really in an asthmatic types of conditions and things is really a neoplasm itself of organ, and the same thing applies that people could help clear this neoplastic condition up. Anyway, I was just thinking, of course, like, you know, when you look at the industry, you could imagine it. You've got all these sorts of molecules which are used, can't you? They're emulsifiers, which life hydrate is. They cause a viscosity to be present, which life hydrate is. You're seeing, like in a product, various things that's put to cause a stabilization of the product, yes, which life hydrate is. And providing that you've got a long shelf life, you've got any of these, and you keep them in a dry spot, they are good in 1,000 years.
Wow.
And they haven't deteriorated. It's as fresh as the day that it's put in there. But and this is sort of a sixth generation type of conditioning that some product would come to be done more this way. But it's necessary, really, because a lot of people, they really want good hair. You want to have good shiny hair, and you're looking at luster of the hair. How much hair is there? Most could have more hair, and you could learn more how urine therapy and various things that you could do could really benefit this more, and how important Life Hydrate is, bringing that in, and various other things that you could do that really assist to cause wrinkles and things to become like the cells that's underneath to become more hydrated, and suddenly the skin becomes all plump back out again, you see? Yeah? And it's like, yeah. Oops. Oh, we've got noise again, mate.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Okay, now it's all just fading. Okay, it's okay. Oops.
It's back?
Yep, now it's off. Slightly on a little bit.
Okay, let me turn my microphone down a little bit.
Okay.
I'm getting a headset, so this will be a temporary problem.
You'll be able to hear me better, yeah, exactly. Because you don't want your own mic sound in there. Yeah. Okay. You'll be able to maybe hear me and then turn it up when you need to, or something when you're talking, perhaps. But so far, mate, like what we've just been talking about is vitamin L or Life Hydrate, yeah? And we've just sort of been talking about there being detectable levels where this is in your blood, and it has great antioxidant capacity, and it's one element of itself out of three, which I studied and I saw was in most people's blood, and that's called blood-borne inhibitors, which if you pick up a copy of Colloidal Biology, The Secrets of an Alkaline Body, somebody could learn more about this, or Jump Cell Rejuvenation as well, which is Atlantic Books. Let's see. The body, though, if you could see this, you've got a blood-brain barrier, which is made up out of albumin, and only 1 in 120 odd particles of albumin is small enough to pass through the blood-brain barrier. So it's really supposed to be really cinched. And yet, like where boys are, of course, testosterone causes the brain to be more open longer, and it takes time for the brain to be developed. And during times like that, he could be suffered far more from all sorts of toxins that shouldn't be there in the blood, really. Anyway, the substantia nigra really is like a grey matter underneath, your brain, like stalks of the cauliflower, and those stalks in the cauliflower or something. Okay, those stalks is like the substantia nigra, and right there you've got nice amount of housing, of course, of dopamine and things like that, which really is a nerve to nerve. However, it's connected more to systems, which is about a muscle eventual connectedness to get things done and causing a more search-like behaviour. So where somebody really doesn't have dopamine, for instance, they're very cat's potatoed out. But when you do suddenly, like if you have a brain alterative, for instance, you've been given some dopamine, and suddenly all of a sudden you look back and go, damn, I really achieved a lot today, yes? So, there could be there is a behaviour which causes neurotransmitters, and so your behaviour is what causes neurotransmitters or not. So either you use it or lose it. So yeah, but and so if we could really imagine what's a proper condition of the body, one could see that, for instance, ulceration of the intestine, which is because the terrain hasn't been kept, and like canthopolaritis and these sorts of things are all kept at bay just by having a small amount of life hydrate. Like what we're talking about, a third of a teaspoon is a dose like to put in some water, and you keep that in the fridge, dissolved, and then drink some of that 3 or 4 times a day, like 3 or 4 ounces of it a bit. It's truly linked to be able and assist to help with the heart and, of course, your cardiopulmonary functioning, and it really increases someone's survival rate, where toxin would be in the day, especially athletes and people like that. It's really protective more, and blocks and stops toxin from causing myocardial infarction and things like this. But toxin shouldn't be there, that's one thing. But anyway, it's really, you've got lots of conditions where sisters and brothers have sorts of cystic types of fibrosis and polycystic types of conditions, and lots of neoplasm comes from synovial type like fluid, like endothelial cells, and that then ends up growing into something which is beyond economy, what a body could manage, and produces a lot of lactic acid and causes itself to be in a rapid cell wall repair response otherwise. And that's what neoplasm is. But where someone is, they could bring things in that blocks chitin resonance sclerotin, which Life Hydrate does, and it blocks and stops fermentation, where N-glyconeurominic acid does the opposite. So if you improve sleep, you're really, by doing some Life Hydrate, for instance, you're really nose breathing, and that this encourages you to be able to nose breathe perfectly, because it causes blood platelets to be unstuck. Plus, it produces nitrous oxide when you go to sleep, like a cold ice pack sort of does. So it really stops leaky gut, which it's such a remarked effect. We're just talking about Life Hydrate, and so many products, which there is something which is very specific that's behind that. You've got rhodium, osmium, and ruthenium, which is noble element, and if one looks, rhodium can be on the market sometimes between $9,000 and $26,000 in the past an ounce. It's extremely sought after, and certainly what's come from life, which is orthophilic, is the type of noble element that anybody would or should bring in, because it's enzymatically linked and no heat is being used, and it comes from life itself. So everybody really that's got proper levels of Life Hydrate in their body, in their blood, it totally prevents, and when you've got enough, you don't really see any addictive behaviour. Interesting. But also, too, you could see that where somebody has this, they've got enhanced cellular sensitivity to insulin, where they don't really have any diabetic problems, where most people could, and it's not having proper surfactant in the body. So always, where Life Hydrate really is consumed more with some water, like what we're talking about is a little bit, your residue that would have been left as a plaque all of a sudden gets cleared away from the prostate and from organs and things, which is really just a build-up of calcium phosphate that should get dissolved. So it reduces, for, of course, like everybody's thinking who are having children, it helps protect and stops any premature birth. It truly is so important. Imagine it's like it's one of the primary nutrients in breast milk, the primary nutrients in colostrum. So something must be very important about this, isn't it? And it must be really like a molecule like what we're talking about, and not something that's close to it that comes from another animal. But you and I, we don't really have any DNA in our body to be able to break a surfactant down that comes from an animal like what we pointed out. It really improves when you have this, your own fertility, and creates a much better muscular performance and effort. It assists to cause adenosine diphosphate, which is a molecule that's spent once you have energy, and it converts that adenosine diphosphate back into adenosine triphosphate, and so suddenly you've got energy again. So it powers you up, and so you're able to do more, and takes much less time to be recovered from something you did. So vitamin L really is very modulative for athletes, and there's certain things that certainly act as an ergogenic aid, because it's like a fitness that you develop and build up overall in your body. And to synthesize nitrous oxide, like what we're talking about, which is a vasodilator. It opens up your glimpse channels, yeah? Okay? Yeah. So that's what's supposed to be, and so a lot of people have said to me that it's so important that what they did was to have something like the Easy Tea a little bit, or something that's got some B vitamin in it, which also has Life Hydrate, and they noticed that it was a total pre-tox, meaning they brought that in before any toxin was brought in, and it completely caused their body not to have any after effect of the toxin. So when people drank and they suddenly, were fine. It really didn't have any hangover whatsoever. Life Hydrate Vitamin L really is like just to show you how vital what proper liver function is, and that somebody could be waking up in the morning and feel really good and not have any hangover per se. And that's pre-tox sort of nutrients, like. And so most of our formulas have really got B vitamin in it, and also Life Hydrate. And so some things that's very specific, like Easy Tea, for instance, is an appetite suppressant. It kind of makes you feel good, so you don't feel like you need to eat anything much. So that's what Easy Tea does, but also it will get rid of a stomach ache, like Quick Smart sort of thing. See, so but where somebody drinks a liter of water and they put just a little third of a teaspoon of Life Hydrate in there as a powder, it's very potent and very strong. Vitamin L really is an antidote, like what we're saying, to toxicity, and it totally kind of really does reduce hangover symptoms and things, and everybody reports, damn, it's so incredible that it does that. But 30 minutes before consuming any toxin, also, it prepares the body and it blocks the effect of any toxified sort of condition that something can have existed. Where something is consumed more, where Life Hydrate is, and you've got plenty of that in your body. We've just talked about if somebody just bought in Easy Tea, that could be because they're interested to have appetite suppressant, and it's a mood elevator, and it's a natural amphetamine, or brain alterative, like we talked, dopamine, serotonin, and you get things done. Your brain sharpens up. Digest aid assists to help mitochondria be able to convert spent energy back into energy useful, and assist to cause the mitochondria to be able to produce energy and produce more mitochondria in the cells. So cellular factors can be increased so that you've got a hell of a lot more capacity inside your cells. So just beyond like anybody doing something to help protect themselves, because it's like pre-tox, it really minimizes the damage that's associated with all sorts of things that somebody could know. There's some toxicity like heavy metals or graphene and things. Like the blue manna that we have assists to help break graphene down. Very, very few things would do that, but the Life colloid does, and the blue manna. So, vitamin L, we've had our show bit about today a little. It really prevents apoptosis, which is programmed cellular death. So, you're looking at a longer life the more that you've got N-acetylneuraminic acid in your body, and providing that you've got a really good ratio of good waste inches, like no waste there whatsoever, and you've got more A flamed out. So that's your ratio, and this creates and causes this to come to be more. So it stops, as I said, all the free radical damage to endothelial cell, which line the passageways of the cells, and it really improves all of the mitochondria. Like we've been talking about, we talked and just said to our listeners that you've got a membrane depolarization, meaning that, when energy is past there, it has to be neutralized again to be able to be charged back up again, you see. And it improves anyone's ability really, to actually end up having a good rejuvenation, So, let me think. Well, I think that a sustainable, everybody is thinking, well, that word sustainable, we gave that word something which hardly anybody talked about it. Life Food was for a sustainable future. And slow but sure, the word sustainableness comes along. Sustainable development today, of course, is having a COVID plan, which that's not properly sustainable. And also having a plan for carbon, apparently. Everything is said that's our biggest emergencies, which I don't agree with that. And I think a lot of people don't either. And that by having a COVID plan and having a plan to tax people's sins for using carbon, that's going to prevent future death, you see. But we can see that it's not a proper narrative. It's just like not wanting to deal with any hostage situation and having a policy just to have killed everybody in the picture, and innocent people screaming stop because they're all getting wiped out as well. But a policy is existing, you see. But anyway, let's look at carbon just for a second. I think that's really good. You've got a carbon cycle going on the Earth. And we can say that a secret is locked up in the ice in the Antarctic. And when you look there, you can see something occurred in the past. And you can look and see what that would have been equal to, and you can calculate it. So one thing you can find is a layer, of a massive amount of carbon and soot and coal. And you can see there were huge firewalls. And you can imagine when you calculate it, but we can't calculate complete because there would have been a lot of ice over the water which would have melted. So we only can consider all the ice that would be left over a land mass, which takes much, much longer to melt. But you could just look at the figure and honest, it's going to lowball to start with how much was burned, but you're going to go beyond that in your brain. But just imagine for now that all the greenery and all the trees and everything that that grows as a tree or anything on the earth is represented in the size of a loaf of bread. And now you could imagine how much was burned back then and in relation to all the trees that we have now. And you could imagine a loaf of bread, stick with that, you're just looking at it, and now you're inside a huge semi-trailer. And it's like a semi-trailer's worth that burned in relation to all the trees that we have now, which is just really like a loaf of bread. Of course, most people could say, where's the forest? And we've got cycles of cooling and warming, and everyone must bring that into a proper validity, because you've got a context where something fits, and something has to fit more contextually. But what if you've just got C.V. Cower, which is a criminal bank cartel of a one world order that has its own patsy, and all that you hear is it's very sustainable, that you guys need to all be taxed because you're sinning, because you're using what we give you, which is really dirty for you. And so you need to be taxed because, that's killing people. Taxes certainly could be shown to kill people, but smart cities would be what is to be surveilled, of course, and that's a better idea apparently, which I don't know where that came from. It's not anyone that we know naturally that just comes up with an idea like that. But it's a tax where it's being, most people don't want to go along with it because they can't see any science behind it, and nobody's ever given any claim. But obviously, lots of stuff is completely off the chart and wrong, and not anything much is scientific, really. That's what most scientists would say that look at that independently. So you'd have to have independent people, not those paid by someone. But okay. It's really like pumping the earth up, which everybody must do because you must be COVID vaccinated, for instance, to stop the deadly offensive. And meanwhile, death is an endpoint where something is. It's that's the emergency, and how much of this is made up? That's the question, and is it that a lot of people think it sure is made up, and is that the reason why it's been so slow to definitely get 27 nations right on board now, getting everybody to be collected of tax? And lots of money is in the coffer right now, ready to be spent. Wow. But everybody was taxed. And where's that got to go? I don't know that these bird cages, which like you're a hamster inside that, and the bird cage is really owned by the rich, is like what people have called a bit of a smart city, and totally terrible because nobody really wants to live in that dirty energy of all the microwave stuff, where people can be affected more, because they're toxic with graphene, but not in an environment where you've got more signal and all sorts of stuff that can not necessarily be as safe as what it would be to be away from that field, because you've got substances which conduct like an antenna inside, which you shouldn't, like magnetite, iron particles, titanium, and lots of stuff is sort of being sprayed, which shouldn't people be alarmed about that? Where's anybody saying that those are the things which is the emergency? I think it's an emergency which some people have said, of course, that you and I, we haven't stepped forward to perform our proper duty and have a proper cup of tea. All that have used the combustible types of fuel, would that be right to call that a fossil when it doesn't have any fossil, when it comes from layers where, how could that be a fossil? And what's the reason? Is it because a fossil was set and isn't produced? when if you wanted to produce that, you could produce it from water when people have. So it's just really a sin tax that everybody has accepted, and like tobacco, when it was bought by people who used that health aid, and that protected them through the 70s and 80s and 90s from all the hazardous material that people used when they cut things like carpenters, which had impregnated copper and had creosote, and then had a range of other things which are like cement board, which has asbestos and things, and myelophilia, which is the effect to lungs. People who smoke Marlboro didn't come down with any of those diseases.
I heard about that.
What people could hear about, like nobody, as you said, have heard that flesh from an animal is got the molecule of death in it. But we haven't also heard, yeah, that's true, that a sustainable development isn't getting microwaved out and getting firestormed, so that you've got your land grab going on, or carpet bombs being allowed. Nobody could say that that's not an emergency, that those are the types of things which is going on. But 27 countries have signed on to be punished, and did anybody sign themselves on to stop the jab? Yes. Some people signed on to stop the jab, so they're not part of the jab, yet others are eager. And so where's consent really, where any of that is? It really hasn't been. And these are sort of transgressions that relate to governance itself, and being controlled because you've got vested interest. And how can you have vested interest? It's against the law. Private person can't be running over somewhere to negotiate anything for us, and that would be just a criminal act where anybody would have gone along with anything that's like that. It just is. Carbon really it behaves more as an insulator, and like silica and like germanium, for instance, could be more semiconductive. If you put carbon in a certain way, like graphene oxide, for instance, suddenly it becomes very highly magnetic, but it's really not something much that you're going to have found in nature, and it really is pretty toxic. But if you're looking at carbon dioxide, and you're seeing it just spilling out over a glass, and you only can have a certain amount in there, that's it. And for the 600 million years past, when you look at C14 in various studies, you can see that carbon has always remained constant right throughout all time. And honestly, you can see the reason why. When excess it just is spilling out, and it only can fill up to a certain amount, and that's all that the atmosphere can hold. So, but if you want to control and tax people, you could make up what you like, which isn't scientific at all, and then you can make an American Clean Future Fund and you can fund that to some philanthropy, and suddenly, it all comes to be something which is quasi above you. How did it get there? But you're now paying $1,700 or more, something like a family, and $600 as an adult as a tax. I mean, that's what would have to be for us if we were signed on board, and did a chief Supreme Court judge get stuff because he really wasn't on board, and that's the reason why you and I are not on board at the moment, because he was sort of against that, but he was sort of more for all the people who said that didn't seem right at all. And why should we be paying the debt right now more for that, when suddenly, of course not suddenly, none of us could ever pay the interest on what's been borrowed, and it's over $1 trillion. And how much would it be if you and I, we all had to pay $1,700 tax last year. Plus, if you were an adult, you've got to have put $600 worth of money toward this, and somebody collected it. And now, what are we going to do with all of it? If the revenue that's collected is really a gain more for the people, and the Federal Reserve Bank, any profit is supposed to be handed over to them. The Treasurer can't have any profit. So a private group of people just skimming off the profit. So if we just look about it, you're going to see 0.04%, is basically the concentration, which is so small, that carbon dioxide by itself is such a small amount. How can that be the thought as to be how the cause of something in any way when it's such a small percentage of the atmosphere? The increased global sort of temperatures always is shown actually when carbon decreases. And so when carbon when carbon increases, global temperature generally has been decreased. And when carbon dioxide was decreased, temperatures tended to be increased. So it's the opposite of what that is said at the moment. So its studies really show how the fluctuation really has pretty much hovered, and the highest point's ever been maybe 500 parts per million. And the lowest point like maybe 340, 320, or really right now we're very, very low. We're down at the lowest level more or less. But studies show that carbon dioxide really has always, as we're talking, you can see that picture of black ice, a block or whatever, just pouring itself over as a smoke outside, and it's just only so much can be held in glass, and everything is being spilled out. And now you're looking at the Earth's atmosphere, and only what could have been held there, and everything more or less is just spilled out and not kept there. So it's really in a balance. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't have dirty fuel and dirty energy, but why don't we have clean energy? And all that money, a bloke built a car to run off water, in the 1920s, and drove it around, and he didn't need billions of dollars to be driving around running on water. You've got temperature, which is absorbed more and doesn't sort of go anywhere by carbon, and you've got material that's made out of carbon that you can heat it to 10,000 degrees and you can pick it up straight away because it doesn't hold any heat, and it pushed all the heat back and never brought any in. If you've got something which spills, it goes to excess, it spills over. And as we talk about the C14 studies and things, which is all to do with carbon decay, and the evidence really shows that no matter for how long you could go back into the past, you're pretty much looking at an overall keptness of that being relatively the same. And then, did any of these people actually tell you how did that water get up there where it is? Did they ever say that it was because of a calamity that occurred and all that water got thrust up where it is? And what does anybody know about all of that? And personally, when somebody goes and they look at the hydrogen ion, for instance, and you can see that where did you collect it? Did you collect it from the same spot? And what's happened with that same spot where you collected that parts of hydrogen? And parts of hydrogen in the sea varies radically. And it's not just averaged out this is pretty crazy how that somebody has not done that, of course, but to just hypothesize that something was got where someone was and take a statistic like 8.25 parts of hydrogen and say, oh my God, look what's here now. We've got 8.19, which really is lower, it's sort of more acid, okay, and that this is really bad because we did that. Well, we didn't do much of anything, and these are things which have fluctuated long before this moment of time, but also to how could you take something somewhere and say that was going to be the average of everything everywhere, which it isn't. And same with the temperature, the same with parts of hydrogen. But carbon excess in the atmosphere simply spills off, and it can't be sustained. It spills off, and only a certain amount of density is actually existing in the glass, which you can see, and everything beyond that is just sort of being spilled off. And so that gives you a clue as you could look at this picture as to be really what's more going on. So back in 1925, what could you see is directing anything, and how is that related? I think that's very ad hoc kind of reasoning. One thing you could say is no one has a right to chop all the trees down, that's bad, and use all the water for something which, like 5,214 gallons of water to get a pound of flesh is ridiculous, when every other food, like tomatoes, it only is 22 gallons of water, and grapes is 71 gallons of water, which is really pretty bad. But everything else falls for a pound of produce between those two benchmarks, whereas where flesh eating is just massive amount of water is grown to grow the crops and everything to feed that, and it ends up being 5,214 gallons of water crazily used for something which is really a molecule of death overall, where somebody could look into these things here. So carbon, it's said, is a toxin, and something imaginary is often said as it's a toxin, and now we've got a solution and you're going to be injected, or no, you're really wrong, you've been using you've been using carbon, and you need to be, that's a sin, and so you need to be taxed, you see? So far, how much would have people actually been taxed, and how much harm would have that occurred? It's wrong that any company wouldn't have let Stanley Myers or anybody of these people who showed you how you could easily run a vehicle off water, and even the manifold that a bloke in Salt Lake made and showed you how a circuit could be put which causes a fuel, could be mostly water, to be running an engine. But there's just so many, like a radiant energetic dynamo, which produces energy on demand, so it doesn't have to be stored. Where produce really is, you could see it's getting less and less and less fructogenics. That wouldn't be the case if it were warming up, for sure, and it wouldn't be the case if we were going to get greenied out. That's not the case at all. You've got more extremes, more in weather, as something moves more towards the grand Morna minimum, which that's an ice age. So it's just too many times into the past. You go back into the 60s and you come forward to the day, you've got all these warnings of death to yourself if you don't, stop something, and now today, that's carbon, but that doesn't add up at all. And who's to blame for selling dirty energy and not letting us have clean energy and monopolizing everything? And that's wrong. So shouldn't that be the biggest danger, monopolization? Because that can never be sustainable itself. How come what's not sustainable is talking about what's sustainable? You see, that's completely like the cart being in front of the horse. It's not going to work. Smart city surveillance, which it all boils down to stuff that you and I, why would we ever want that? The big silica six in bed to make a lot of money. And wow, how good is that? They put their hand up and off they go. And the reporter's already on the desk. They went out to do some work, but they come back and that report's already written on the desk. They didn't found nothing else out there. It's a tax to stop your climate change. It's like you're the one. The big Mick, of course, does a lot of toxification. Agriculture does a lot of toxification. Chopping trees down, that's wrong. How about life food agrarianism and life food and Lifehouse sustainable community more, where people could look into that? It's sort of like more buildings in the ground that's made, so it's sort of, you don't have to add any extra energy in there to keep the temperature stable in your home after a year or so. Somebody could look into this more. We've got Lifehouse Sustainable Community, and you could look on Facebook. I think it might be there. But anyway, I think a lot like the metaphor of the COVID jab. And how two places that looked at this, they said ban the jab, and so they did. But otherwise, where somebody hasn't asked anything, everybody's just trundled along. And what's the actual emergency? I personally think that's the emergency, that you and I have just allowed all of that stuff to go on, and you haven't said stop, properly, like with a pen, which you can, and that's an Article 3 or Article 4 court. Yet it's so bad, of course, that all attention is always distracted, and people are looked at some emergency that was created, and who's there is paying the opposition as well, and both those sides are paid out. And is anybody saying that's so? Well, why not? I think everybody is saying that so, but you don't see that as a message, do you, in anything, the regular media at the moment. And, so war and poverty and the corruption more is, can somebody do the math? You don't have to. You can see the disaster under usury and how COVID is the same as carbon. And saying that's fossil fuel, and now, damn it, that's a sin. Don't you dare use that. You're going to be paying for that. And so, although alcohol is taxed to the hilt, and tobacco is taxed to the hilt, and all the money pays for everybody who goes to hospital, apparently, or something, in some of these nations. But the carbon tax collected is to punish people for using that. Well, of course, the Sultan in various lots of people have stood up and have said, what's your plan, Stan? And that they don't have a plan. It's like, wow, so you just want to whack all these farmers, make sure that they're not able to produce nothing anymore, and everything's going to be okay. There's no plan afterward, which that's not right. You could see that it's just brutalism in policy, and that obviously we the people were not behind anything like that. Carbon sort of behaving as an insulator, like what we're saying, and silicon and uranium is more like acting more as semiconductors, where carbon really comes to be more, not a natural form, it's graphene oxide. Now, as we were just saying, suddenly you're looking at something and it's really become way more, toxic. It's like the new asbestos. And the metaphor of it all, like if we listened to the last podcast, we talked a bit about how it's a setup coming up, the cyber attack and things, and that AI is set up, and Microsoft and these big tech companies under CB Kara, who owns them and controls the programs in AI. And so if you could go to a chat box and it says something to you, they'll program that. So it's just hell for leather that a waged war is by deception. And some, like Mossad, for instance, their motto really is, keep in mind, of course, it's to wage war by deception. So if for what realm more would 95% of all OpenAI, those who worked, suddenly, if you look, they all just wanted to and they threatened to resign, okay? Just recently more. You've got, of course, Intel CEOs and people like that are plants run by CB Kara and run over by think tanks above them, which isn't We the People, and that's in just one Zionistic place, militarized like Israel, and that all of it, where a Stuxnet's worm is, makes Israel the most powerful nation in the world because they've got the Stuxnets, and we help them get that, so that can wreck everything, and it's, so that they've got such a power to be able, but so you've got a centralization of all AI in Israel, and you've got huge industrial base, which is really needed ongoing to have ever got a carbon thing or a COVID scam, and you've got 3/11 in Japan and 9/11 in New York, and a 10/7 in Gaza and Israel, and you've got these scams and planning for things like anybody could look to see, and simulations about what this was, and the cyber attack too coming up simulated. So it's, of course, children, you can see where the dew storm is sort of sanitized, and in Gaza or any land grab place, very sophisticated. Of course, AI was used for, and you've got sixth generation sort of like weaponry, and who has the power and capacity to do anything like that except CB Kara? Of course, everything is really centralized, and you've got AI now being set up, and everything is backdoored to Israel. So it's like a honeypot that anybody would say sex was on the outside of it, but backdoored security systems was being sold. And you've got in-bed lovables who own Microsoft running issues, and you've got one group that just picks up the cloud services and gets all the information, and that's your Jedi. And now you've got a multinational company, meaning that it's not for any nation. It's really run by who owns that, and it's their cyber solution for you. Your own, benefit apparent from what would be left over for you as your cloud security that would be run by the controllers of CB Kara, basically. And so, the last podcast we did was a little bit about how that is being planned, and it's about to unfold more, especially set up for the election year. So it's really with the people in Article 4, which, if you consider those things, there's $2 quadrillion of question, and it's whether it's $1 or $2 quadrillion, fraud is fraud, and a major case really exists. Of course, you've got governments and corporations and you've got a lot of people, a lot of interest in people having their own sovereignty and not care to be taken over. But you're looking at Israel and a nation under Zionism more being a centre more of global development and of AI technologies. You've got Aladdin Computing making bets that it can make in a day that nobody on the stock floor could make for a whole year, betting into a future and causing all of those issues to be arisen as a result of the betting and placidness of funds. Wow. And so it's really an uninterrupted autopilot, mate, not for you or I. It's all connected more by the UN and China and Russia, and but none of these nations, corps at all, just run by a company for itself, not you or I or anyone's national interest per se, but the plan only to own all the chips that they use where those PCs are and servers, which really is what is the picture, is to contain everything under CB that controls all. And now, which has already existed, you know, all of our ledgers have been merged with the enemy corps. And so each can pick on each other to wipe each other out, and it's designed to be set up like that. So it really doesn't, Microsoft sort of fund, which if you think about it, secret sort of all kinds of things, Israeli surveillance of Gaza, and to see children and innocent people just being wiped out because they've got a policy they're not going to want to negotiate with anybody. And so if you're there and innocent, sorry, you know, you're just getting wiped out. But it's fibre optics which is left, and after satellites are knocked out, and Aladdin has made all the bets in one day, like we were talking about, that anybody or all of us could have made in a year or more, and it's itself predicting the future. You know, you're looking at sort of a one belt road initiative sort of thing, and who the next president really is always visited, you know, with and who did that bloke visit with? It's sort of like what people can see, but the corpse really has no consistency, and the issue of children, like what we've talked about, the most important issue, the fertility and birth and a child's life to be free of depopulation, and children to be born more out of form of discretion. It's sort of really who's controlling the corpse, which is you and I, but are we? I think that not. We've just not been performing our proper duty where we should, and that's the biggest enemy, not looking out anywhere else. You've really got to see we the people and sense of joinery where we are, and where bad idea is, where could any joinery be with that? There isn't. Every official is to be done where they're with due diligence to uphold a natural right that you and I have, which is our title, and that's being upheld in an equity interest can be easily seen in that and consideration or not, and to be cleared up of what is a charge when anything can be found, is to protect the government and protect people in governance and protect people everywhere, and we the people, and have a process which assists to clear up the things which should be. You'd see usury really getting cleared up, because that's just absolutely ridiculous. How can anybody have any consensualness where you've got such a foreign affair and foreign agents registration insurance and oaths to serve we the people is supposed to be there, but most of these people have got into office and they can't sign that because you've got too much favour to get to the position of it, and you're never going to be able to say there was not favour to get that position, which each position is supposed to be open to everybody. Yeah? Right. Yeah, right. So your BC bond got you ripped off, unconscionable for any corpse to have contracted with a baby to get the BC bond, how bad. Nobody would care for that. Those are things which should be corrected. Those things very easy, isn't it? The pen is more mighty than the sword, I'm telling you. And there's no office that could really be for rent. But when the office is for rent, is that the reason why you can see people getting just wiped out and a genocide going on? Yeah, with jabs or Gaza or anywhere you like. I think insurance agents all favour more what's going on where the officials are, isn't it? Like in 1948, though, it was mandated that anybody that was being displaced, like in Palestine, they would all be returned back more to their home. But where does anybody listen to anything that's like that? One bloke that got into power, like in Ukraine, said he would be negotiating with their adversary, and quick, smart, suddenly he's doing the opposite. But he only got into power because he said he would negotiate. So suddenly it's quite the opposite, aren't it? Reverse direction. So it's really what's the consistency more where the corporation is itself, and isn't it the children which is really more our future, and that if evidence really is more that the past, you've got a foreign state that's outside Palestine as it was deciding to annex their land, and other nations having done that to them, how were they involved with any of that, which they weren't? Back in 1940, of course, you've got 16,000 civilians, if anybody looks, and suddenly most of those, of course, were all relocated, and a lot of people, a lot of deaths. Today, like the 16,000, I think, I'm not sure, Palestinian, there are 70% maybe is more women and children, and you're everybody there, I would say, is innocent, honest to God, not got caught up in things. But you've got the Israeli Defense Forces and Gaza, and you've got what's going on where the Palestinians are, and nothing acceptable as any consideration at all. But privacy and policy for all, and anything that's adopted that's apparently to protect you. Could you imagine that everything's being done and you're seeing that children are being protected? I don't think so. It's really the cause of anybody who's a victim to be quick, smart, just put to be, they deserved it, and be gaslighted. And you're looking at criminal behaviour, and because it really is making currency, isn't it? So, you know, a common law grand jury, common law court of record trial by grand jury process really has sort of 5 elements to itself, of course, and then one of those elements really is that you've got its own seal in things, and that we could learn really what are those things which make one of these. But it's a positive good, which really is the very things that you and we have, which is personal, how you're feeling about things. And the government really is under the Magna Carta, and all contract is as well, and as pleaded, all good for all, where it's personal, and that's true. Yet, you know, it's really under contract, and it's really, and so you could really say, you know, you're looking at documents, and you're looking at words, and you're often looking at something which doesn't add up. Okay, well, it should. It should have transparency, but it doesn't. It has an implicit and explicit languaging which is vague and past and fraudulent. It is consequential. There's no consensual sorts of consideration which you could look at to see that something existed. So lots of those things is very unilateral, written, and is legal but not lawful. Lawfulness is where equal equity is, where something is. And so under contract law, it's the pen is mightier than the sword, and we the people is above anything that's corporate. And it's really the globe which is held together more by contract law, and it is itself really what holds everything together in our community and locally and internationally. And keep in mind, of course, it's sort of really what resides all of us in all of our being. And this is really what gives grace more to our limitless self, our unlimited self, and our liberty is our justice to have freedom in our lives. Liberty meaning your equalness to each other before the law. And when you're not, you don't uphold that. It's like, hey, stop. Uphold this. That's your right. If you don't uphold the right, where is it? That's right. And it's only upheld. So it's common, and it's coming from common sense, common practice. But I am really is like words somebody uses in common parlance that's adopted more, and it's not for you or I to think that alphabet soup land has got any central organized nervous system, which it doesn't, and can't be hurt, which it can't, but you sure can. Okay, so where's the living in the picture? And that's, you've got to put the like with the like, and that's what Article 4 court and Article 3 courts do. It brings the like with the like, the living with the living, and the living is not joined with the dead anywhere there in that procedure. And so it's really finding charges and discharging those charges and seeing what's needed to really naturally be done in itself, and subconsciously really, it's a real total for yourself really, Paul, and it's an expanded more sense of what happens where you've got more perfect detachment in the process, where something is natural, that ultimately a balance always is assured, and it's really what's desirable, and you've got an acceptedness of what goes on in terms of how one really is not self, and then honest to God, you and I, we're focusing to know more about ourselves, and we're the people able to perform the function to be as a check and balance on things and look at government transgression. Of course, bliss really comes more about because everybody has no thinking necessary, and bliss naturally then flows as a result of what this is an achievement. But this is now, isn't it? And it can't be in the past or the future. It really is now, and it's sort of who's taking action, and have you lifted a finger toward this, that we can see what you're doing is really helping. And otherwise it's really a self-betrayal, and it's self-betrayal which really isn't proper civic function. And this sort of life really is really your liberty, meaning equalness to each other before the law, and otherwise liberty isn't. And living life, more I aware, there really isn't that self-betrayal much, and you've got more proper civic function, and you've got an examining of the things which need to be looked at and to be cleared away. And otherwise desire and fear, where somebody is causing them to be clung to some bank inside, and they're stuck where that is and unable to take action per se. And yet it's really on behalf of all of us that a mentality really is where you could feel more healed up, and you can see a great bright future for all of us, which we must act, and you can see this all gets cleared up. It's a therapeutic which it has, which you could follow instruction that's given to you afterward, and one could have uncovered more the root where something was being lived that was just a false illusion, and one could then be left with reality. And so, what's inner is like outer, as water like is all around, and this is bliss. And so really achieving a bank which is within ourselves, and not being stuck because the bank isn't what exists, but the river, because it's the river like you and I, which owns the bank, and everyone has the same condition within themselves. Now you don't have any more monopoly. You've got positive reduction, and you don't have war anymore. So it's really instruction that everybody experiences that you carry out more, and it's like water finding its own level almost. And it's the real cause of all of us to really have a more happiness from this insight. And you can see that ignorance where it is, my God, it's been the cause of pain and suffering, gets cleared away. And so it's really a world where the mind more doesn't have any need. And so quick, smart, then you can lift both hands for all and have a great presence. And one is not left with just memory, which is like mental chatter, or trying to give somebody else an experience, which God help us, you can't. How about learning a bit more about structure and being able to give someone more an inductive process by the things that you're doing? It's an outward lived meditation ongoing where somebody is in perfect detachment and not controlled by the things that you have pleasure for or have fear about. But it's really including rather than excludedness, in our way of being and things. And so really, what really happens, that's this power is formless more where you are, and to be able to get things done comes more from an empty center, and that practiceness more, and perseverance and persistence is really what causes you and I to be able to blossom and have something ever more loving. And we shouldn't really make this mistake. I think we've talked a bit about in our podcast that somebody's the doer where you're not. We the people really is by more of our common custom. And this is what does what this is, not you or I. It's what's time worn as what's accepted by all of us, and what's irregular, like it's totally unconscionable, like we were talking about, to allow contracting with a baby, which to get a BC bond by fraud, and then after that, But you and I, we've got Article 3 and Article 4 court where a true bill could be discharged, and it's really the power of the estate as we the people, which is the proper chain of command that's above, and you're the governance and the holder of your land. And the rules apply more that, in your common custom, it's really a grand jury, and the government accepts, and it's pre-ordered and pre-authorised, and that all contract really is under the Magna Carta, like we were saying, under the laws of the land. And it's really selected more by we the people, it can't be from a city then. And so it's the way that you've listed yourself to do such administratively. And otherwise, you've got a standing, because the standing really is government transgression and that harm that can have been done that you look at and see. And the jurisdiction really is from the transgression and harm, and the venue where you have this is selected, and this is from the land, not under commerce. And that we the people really, without the corpse, that means outside the corporation, which you have to be, can't be inside a corporation, but you're under the laws of the land, from the land. And typically, like in Article 4, you're going to get 26 people that agree, well, no, I think we should have some investigation. And once something is set, a quorum perpetually ever is until you resolve whatever you have as a matter. This must be performed because whoever's looking at a nation that's been run over by warlords and people that's like that, by C.B. Cower, you want to be regulated internally, because otherwise you're going to be regulated from the outside, aren't you? And it's really not you, the doer, which is a notion that you could have had, which really would have caused you to be so bonded out and not empty, to be able to get things done because it's so simple. And can get rid of the complexity that you've had because it's not complex whatsoever. And so there's different types of grand jury. There's a presentment, right? Or there's a indictment where a prosecutor is. So there's two different types of grand juries. Many could be just to present because you're forming to be able to consider but all denial really is minimised, where we occupy more the high ground where this is often done from the local courthouse, where on the other hand, more a prosecutor could have given somebody something which is a true bill straight off and an indictment. Otherwise, it's a true bill upon acceptance where something is, or denial. And it's the prosecutor as the claimant, or if claimant didn't exist. It's what's initiated this process can be simple, that it's a presentment, and sets up as a presentment to look to see if something exists or not. And it's really the easiest for someone to prove, and over time, things are taken on that's larger sorts of issues. But it's general that a grand jury really takes on various things which are quick, smart, easy, that we the people really want, definite. And it's a field of inquiry, and as you grow where public care and relatedness is for the things that you've done. And so you're free to do this, that you feel you're not the doer, and that the nation of you really isn't the doer, and all of that just is bondage. Life wants to do this and will help you if you just get out of the way of it. Life really is, for one can't be living life. Life goes on, you see, and in action or inaction, life goes on. And it's really of the lovableness more of you, which guarantees the continuity. And if somebody was unafraid more, they could contemplate life more in an infinite mode, like we're saying. But the body really, where a claim is really the body of the claim itself, not some heading. And it's the body of the claim that counts, not the heading, of course. And it's only under common law and the Court of Record trial by grand jury process, which operates more. And you've got to have these 5 distinctions. Of course, we started to talk a bit about it. One is that you're under your own seal, of course. Then the second one is you can only have wet ink autographs, verified evidence to have standing. And so, everybody's under the seal, and that things are made public more on the day that's given, and then bonds are sort of written up for we the people as a principle of the matter. The magistrate and a sheriff administratively can be given to you as a corpse to be witnesses, and then of course, independently you the independent jury, the tribunal is, which then forms and is above the corpse after that point. So it's really all has to be sort of outside the corpse under the laws of the penalty of perjury. And so those are 5 sort of principles, really, that is a common law court of record trial by grand jury process, or to be an Article 4 or Article 3 court. Article 4 is over governance, and Article 3 is more contract. So, basically the Fourth Estate, we just would wrap it up for our podcast today. We've covered a little bit of things. The Fourth Estate is really pre-authorised, and government really is present there for the protection of such. And all selection really comes about as a majority vote, more of those present, and the members really could ever be replaced if anybody was absent, of course, because it just goes on and it's not dependent on any one person, but everybody's sworn in as you're going on there, and you always have a quorum. So it's really no decision that anybody that's reviewable after the fact that somebody, as we the people, have selected something. But and you're looking at a government transgression, did that occur? Did you get a true bill? Or no, you didn't get a true bill? Okay. But if articles of peace and security are the very things which you would be looking into, of course, to discharge any charge that you were able to find, and private property really being removed, which shouldn't have been, and it was deseized or confiscated, and that wasn't really proper with any lawful condition that happened to you, yeah? You've got a legal sentence that wasn't done by your peers, or nor from the land, nor from the hand. And so you had land, house, family, children. You had your liberty taken from you, and you had your not your proper title. So those are things that can be looked at, you see, by this process. It's really, those are things that can be managed by this process. It's the process that's designed to manage things like this. It's so easy. It's not complex. And people just need to lift a finger every day to kick it off, which is happening around the globe right now. So such a body, but many of these need to be, so it can be taken care of in things. But really, the body really could be very informed by having proper nutrient, like we talked about, or and it could have resolved anything that was like a dispute, quick, smart, or otherwise, hey, you don't see that. You've got a lot of transgression where the body might be, including a body as a body politic or body from the land. As a body from the land is higher than a body politic, it's like a chain of command present where things are. But none could lawfully prohibit any such process from going on. You could get sued if you did, and it'd be quick, smart that you would. And why would you want to prohibit that? Because that's sort of we the people. Anybody in government has to have we the people as joinery, you see, to be government. Otherwise you've got fascism. And to have gained everything from public acceptance. And so 4 members need to be convinced who've been selected. And those people that are convinced, they take whatever the transgression is, and they show that to the government and the government's error. And without delay, you've only got 40 days more or less to have corrected that. And then you've got a power otherwise to disdain, to oppress any government corpse which hasn't done its job like proper, because we the people have the power of seizure of private property. Most people don't want to stand in the way of we the people, that what makes sense. It's pretty ridiculous. But all who choose more to assist really sworn in on the day always, and it's always authorised, and it always is of some fundamental protection, which is supposed to be against tyranny. Otherwise, you've got conditions going on, don't you? Which is like, hey, our currency is getting undermined. So if you're the doer and you're not that notion of bondage, it's beautiful because it's a real resulting accusation, which could be called a presentment, where somebody is just looking at things, and all denial where that is becomes more minimized, you see, because you're occupying things like what we said is the high ground more. So anyway, let's go beyond life just for you to be apparently living life, which you can't do, but life, look over viewing what you do, and all of us could be the action more that takes place. And that's not you being in action or inaction. It really is water finding its own level. If you allow this to be, it is going to. But until it's expressed, it isn't. Yeah? And when it is, it comes to be. So there we go. We've got a bright future, and this, what we've been talking about, is being future-paced and happening, and it's an assemblage point that was formed and that we come to, and it ushers in this new epochal golden age. Yes? So all of us, we should pay attention to everything and do what you can to get this message more passed on to everybody and pay attention to everything that's more coming up. Yep.
Okay.
All right, mate. Love you, mate.
Love you too.
We'll catch up to you tomorrow, mate. Love you, mate. Love to everybody. All right, mate.